Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I hope the week's gone well. Let me start with macro thoughts. China state media quoting Vice Premier Liu He is saying Beijing full of confidence in the economic future, optimistic about the economy in 2020. He told Chinese reporters in DC Phase 1 trade deal eases tensions, market uncertainties, stabilizes expectations in the China economy. And I think this is the key point. I watched that entire signing ceremony, and I think both sides are now heavily invested in the near and medium term in making this work. 23rd of December, I sensed there was an easing of tensions, and I said the crossfire of a trade war now ebbing well for a few months because Trump has an election to win and Xi has an economy to rescue and underpin. Chinese want the economy now to get more support. I told Ramayang of CGTN Xi Jinping had a put option on the US economy, which was also a put option on Trump's re-election, and I think Trump understood that well. 8th of January, in response to somebody else, I think it was Ian Bremmer, I said I expected détente. He was highly skeptical ahead of the election, and the Phase 1 deal signals as much. I still think the market is too negative, and therefore it's time to buy the Aussie, the Kiwi, commodities. This is an entente cordiale and suits both sides at this time. The most important currency to watch is, as I said on the 13th of August last year, the renminbi. Where is that right now? Renminbi's trading at 686.40, and maybe it's a big call, but I think we could see this appreciate to 650. In the background, I think we have a grand currency bargain. You know what I think about, I essentially think it is a manipulated currency, which is ironic given that they lifted the manipulation signal recently. Soybeans versus the S&P has not joined the party yet, in part, I think, because they diverted their demand to Brazil. But I think you see weakness in the Brazilian real now, which is signaling you're going to see a diversion back into the US. And they didn't want to fall foul, I think, of the WTO. The S&P 500 index Thursday rose to a fresh all-time high, and it's been a string of those of late. Home thoughts, king in the north, I mean North India. Mesmerizing picture by Nitish Madan of a mesmerizing creature via Parveen Kaswan, whom I follow and is a conservationist in India. And the tiger really is a remarkable creature, isn't it? This is a photograph of elephants in Maralal via Jambo magazine. I love elephants, and still the most unforgettable experience was in the Savo, and literally being on our own and being surrounded by a herd of more than 100. We were kind of petrified at the same time, because in the Savo they're quite wild. And then there is the little known Lake Michaelson on Mount Kenya, hidden in the beautiful gorges. This lake is the real portal to paradise at 13,000 feet. Africa by Light, Jambo magazine. The day we took a helicopter ride to Mount Ololokwe with Sirikoi Lodge, we were initially going to go to Lake Michaelson, but then at that time the weather was very unsettled, and we diverted to Mount Ololokwe, which was fantastic and breathtaking. Taylor Kintzner's Bottled Emotions from 2014, this project, an observation on the consumption of emotional availability at the Saatchi Gallery, rather. Thought-provoking, which I'm sure was the intention. Political reflections, US warship sails through the Taiwan Strait after China trade deal and China election. That's from Bloomberg. The Taiwan Strait is one of the flashpoints in the 21st century, and it's interesting that the Americans chose to do that at this moment. Now, I've watched Lev Parnas's entire interview with AC360 on CNN, and really this would be a knockout blow if this was about facts, but it isn't, it's about politics. But nevertheless, as I wrote on the 4th of November, at the moment of vision, the eye see nothing, and I was referencing pollice verso, or verso pollice, which is a Latin phrase meaning with a turned thumb that is used in the context of gladiatorial combat. And I said the Republican Party would be having to make a hard-nosed political calculation, and in the event they chose to make that calculation, Pence is the coming man. Though if you listen to Lev Parnas, there are two parts of that interview, you would have thought he's going to get knocked out as well. Which brings us to an interesting point of Speaker Pelosi being next in line. Lara Trump in Des Moines, Iowa. It doesn't matter what you look like, the only color that Donald Trump cares about has always been green. Olivia Nuzzi. My article on the 13th of January was how 2020 opens with a bang. I said it's very cinematic and stream of consciousness in 2020. I was quoting an article where the Iraqi Prime Minister said that if he did not comply with Trump's demands, then Trump would have Marine snipers on tall buildings target protesters and security personnel alike in order to pressure me. There is a link from Press TV. Iranians gather for Friday prayers in Tehran to be led by Iran's supreme leader. And basically, if you follow the previous revolution in 78, 79, it was all about Friday. Friday in the Muslim world is a very volatile day. 6th of January, I wrote an article called The Assassination. I was quoting from Russia with Love, the movie. Kronstein outlines to Blofeld his play. Blofeld read Trump. Kronstein, you are sure this plan is foolproof? Kronstein, read Pompeo. Yes, it is, because I have anticipated every possible variation of counter move. Think 2 degrees centigrade of global warming wouldn't be bad. Think again, says the Scotsman. After the warmest decade on record, humanity must stop the rise of global temperatures to avoid catastrophic consequences, like 37% of the entire world's population experiencing severe heat waves on a regular basis. The world's average temperature in each of the last 5 years was more than 1 degree Celsius above pre-industrial levels. For example, the US Glacier National Park once used to have 150 glaciers, but is now down to less than 30 of significant size. The famous US climate scientist Professor Michael Mann, currently on sabbatical in Australia, where fortunately they've had some rain, told Reuters that it was conceivable that much of Australia simply becomes too hot and dry for human habitation, adding that we could well see Australians join the ranks of the world's climate refugees. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, at 1.5 degrees of warming, it is estimated that about 14% of the world's population will experience severe heat waves at least once every 5 years. At 2 degrees, the figure is 37%, with heat waves in India and Pakistan, like the one that killed thousands of people in 2015, potentially happening every year. I think it's inevitable, it's predictable, and it's predicted. 30th of September, I wrote about the end is nigh, the feedback loop and the risks of dieback, where we enter a phase of cascading system collapse. I quoted Greta, entire ecosystems are collapsing. We're in the beginning of a mass extinction. 23rd of November 2015, I was saying I cannot help feeling we're like frogs in boiling water. We have created massive interference in the cosmic tuning phenomenon. World's 5 biggest long-term risks are all environmental for the first time ever, the World Economic Forum is reporting. Let's move on to currency markets. Euro dollar 111.38, dollar index 97.30. Japanese yen continues to soften 110.22, Swiss franc 0.9651. The pound is at 130.82, the Aussie 0.6906. India rupee 71.02, South Korean won 11.5890. Brazilian real has been weakening 4.1852. Egyptian pound 15.8272. This is a multi-year high. In the rand, where they cut a quarter point, 14.3872. Dollar index, my target is 94.50. I think the liquidity bomb is so enormous that it's going to keep the dollar soft. Euro dollar 111.39. This chart is from FX Pip Titan. I am of the view we're going up to 114.50. JP Morgan, we like Netflix going into earnings. Despite Netflix's recent strong performance, we believe investor sentiment remains quite mixed. The least favored FANG stock among investors. We like Netflix shares into earnings. In our view, first quarter expectations are reasonable. They're expecting 9.25 million net adds ahead of inspector expectations closer to 8.5 million. Importantly, fourth quarter serves as Netflix's first chance to climb the wall of worry and show strong growth alongside DIS Plus, while also providing a clearer path to profitability. On the 23rd of September last year, when the price was at 270.75, I put out a conviction buy. And that's all about my theory that the majority of analysts in the US, they're looking at a more mature market, whereas Netflix is now an international business. I quoted an article from 2012 in the New Yorker Annals of Technology, Streaming Dreams by John Seabrook. People went from broad to narrow, and we think they will continue to go that way, spending more and more time in the niches, because now the distribution landscape allows for more narrowness. I am aware of this competition, but I don't think they're going to have a chance. Netflix's share price is around 338. I'm looking for it to cross 500 at some point this year. Commodity markets, gold 1555.75. I think it's well underpinned this year, era of cheap money and plenty of geopolitical risk. Oil, I follow somebody called Simple_Trends, and he called a breakout yesterday. This is his chart. He spoke of a hidden bullish divergence on daily as well, and I'm expecting a move back into 60. Palladium starting to look like a crypto in 2017. RSI must be close to 100, said Andreas Steno. And then a corp trader says, what would that make the RSI on Rhodium? Have a look at this. And that took me back to, it is a parabola. It is a curve each of them feels unmistakably. It is the parabola. They must have guessed once or twice, guessed and refused to believe that everything always collectively had been moving toward that purified shape, latent in the sky, that shape of no surprise, no second chance. months, no return. Emerging markets, Turkey's central bank cut its one-week repo rate to 11.25%, below the inflation rate of 11.8%. In an interview last year with Sputnik, I said no one except die-hard Erdogan-supporting Turkish nationalists are prepared to throw good money after money gone bad on the basis of Erdogan's hocus-pocus monetary policy. There's a stag party going on in India, a stagflation party. David Inglis, the GDP figure is the weakest recorded under Modi, who first swept to power 5 years ago, promising to take India's economy to new heights and create millions of jobs every year. And in my view, as I wrote in December last year, the politics of ethnocratic nationalism are a complete bust. Sub-Saharan Africa. The implication for 2020's Africa remains that the continent will be short of capital, and to a great extent this is a function of its demographics, the Africa Report. For example, Nigeria exports only $1 a day per person from oil exports. Even if the oil price trebled to $180 a barrel and Nigeria got all the proceeds, $3 a day is not going to make every Nigerian rich. For all the excitement about cobalt, the numbers are even smaller in the DRC, where exports are worth 50 cents per person per day. It is not just China. We see this within Africa too. Morocco's borrowing costs are remarkably low. Morocco has such a surplus of savings, it is indirectly exporting them across West Africa via its bank's expansion plans. What marks China, Mauritius or Morocco apart from Kenya, DR Congo, Nigeria and Zambia? After analyzing 1,586 data points in as many countries as possible since 1960, we found out that demographics, and more precisely the fertility rate, affect savings and interest rates and strongly drive per capita GDP. When there are fewer children, i.e. China, Mauritius and Morocco, the ratio of adults to children pensioners improves and GDP growth per capita trebles. In Angola, the DR Congo and Nigeria, the fertility rate will remain above 3 over the next 20 years. Policymakers can talk about financial inclusion and mobile money, but if a country has a total fertility rate above 3, bank deposits will probably be 30% of GDP or less, and real interest rates will be one of the highest in the world. That took me back to an article I wrote about Ouagadougou in 2014, and I said the African youth demographic, many characterize this as a demographic dividend, which for beautiful Blaise turned into a demographic terminator. Zambia, point of no return, public finances head south, while the Patriotic Front clamps down on dissent ahead of next year's election. The ruling PF's continued state of denial about the country's dire debt situation sees the year begin with loan defaults, dwindling state revenues, disintegrating public services, and unpaid civil service salaries. The government's failure to make a €6 million repayment on its military transport aircraft, one of a raft of delayed loan payments, including to Chinese lenders, signals immense pressure on the state coffers. Debt is expected to worsen this year and approach 100% of GDP. I wrote an article where I quoted Ozymandias, and I said the canary in the coal mine is Zambia. Investors have lost faith in government promises to get spending under control. The government has fallen out with the IMF as well. At that time, Eurobonds were trading at 60 cents in the dollar. Even the Chinese, who many thought was Santa Claus, have thrown in the towel. I quoted Xi Jinping, who spoke of the end of vanity. I went back to Ecclesiastes. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. I said, it seems to me we're at a pivot moment, and we can keep regurgitating the same old mantras like a stuck record. And if we do this, it all turns Ozymandias. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty and despair. Nothing beside remains round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare. The lone and level sands stretch far away. Wamagaisa, who I follow on Twitter, has quoted an article by the CEO of Imara Asset Management. It's a bleak account of the economic situation in Zimbabwe. You may need a hard drink at the end of it. The introduction of Zimbabwe's own currency in 2019 has been a disaster as predicted, writes John Legatt. And that goes back to Yuval Harari. Money is the most universal and most efficient system of mutual trust ever devised, and there's zero mutual trust in Zimbabwe's currency. 21st of January, I said, what is clear? This is last year, 12 months ago. What is clear is that Zimbabwe is at a tipping point. I said the mind game that ZANU-PF played on its citizens has evaporated in a puff of smoke. In this video clip from Wamagaisa a few months ago, you see Mnangagwa mocking noisemakers, let them tweet noise while we rule. And as I've said, Mnangagwa, who's been eulogizing Mugabe, has failed and is as untenable as his erstwhile mentor. This is a tweet from Ethio Telecom laying out the half-year earnings results. Generated 22.04 billion of beer revenue in the first half, 104% of its target, and explains why people are excited and why Ethiopia is rising, as I wrote in July 2018. Africa's richest woman and Angola's ex-first daughter, Isabel dos Santos, expressed interest on Thursday in running for the presidency in an interview with Portuguese TV channel RTP. She said it's possible. Lourenço has cracked down on the role of his predecessor's children. Of course, she's not even in the country, so what she's talking about is absolute nonsense. And I don't think she'd dare go back. 46-year-old businesswoman, nicknamed the Princess, estimated to be worth $2 billion, denies the allegations as a witch hunt, framed the accusations not just as an attack on her family, but as a campaign against future candidates for office. We cannot use corruption or the supposed fight against corruption in a selective way to neutralize who we think could be future political candidates, she said. It's about the fight for power. South Africa cut its benchmark rate to 6.25% from 6.5%. Inflation slowed to 3.6% in November and has been inside the central bank's target range since April 2017. The central bank governor said the model prices in a 25 basis point cut in this quarter and another one in the final 3 months of 2020. They cut their economic growth forecast to 0.4% and lowered projections for 2020 through 2022. South African all shares up 1.99% year to date. Dollar rand did quite well, 14.3907. Egypt left rates unchanged at 12.25%. The Egyptian pound has soared further to 15.8298. EGX30 down 0.98%. Nigerian all-share best performing in the world, up 9.35% in this year. Ghana up 0.01%. ACLED Resources, al-Shabab in Somalia and Kenya, very good visual. I wrote about this. I said, let's finish up in Kenya, where we're currently under a plague of locusts and al-Shabab attack. I was talking about this Manda Bay attack, which is the first carried on a US military installation inside Kenya ever. They knocked out some spy surveillance planes, which I thought was pretty bold. I called it a Jedi-level intrusion, an asymmetric warfare coup de grace. The US Africa Command has sent its crack East Africa response force to secure the airfield and augment security. This is in fact a big deal, I said. Telegraph is saying al-Shabab is shooting locusts with machine guns as Somalia battles the biggest swarms in 25 years. They've come from Yemen. Typical swarm can contain up to 150 million insects per square kilometre. Each locust can grow to 4.3 inches long and travel up to 95 miles a day depending on the wind. They've already destroyed 70,000 hectares of farmland in Somalia and neighbouring Ethiopia. Somalia's chaotic fighting makes spraying pesticide by aeroplane, which the FAO has called the ideal control measure, impossible, the agency said in a statement. Kenya is in advanced talks with the World Bank for a fairly priced loan of up to $1 billion, a senior Treasury official said. Balance of the funds will be raised through Kenya's first sovereign green bond, said Julius Muai, the principal secretary in the Ministry of Finance. Africa report, Kenya in 2020, higher taxes, higher debt, more referendums. I want the economy to be more important focus than politics, Kenyatta said. The plan is to increase the circulation of money in the struggling economy. Kenyatta made his address from Mombasa, left out how he plans to revive the coastal city's economy, which has been devastated by his primary infrastructure project, the Standard Gauge Railway. A week before Kenyatta's speech, his administration introduced a new 3% patriotism tax on small businesses. A new 15% presumptive tax also came into effect on January the 1st. While asking Kenyans to hold him and other leaders accountable for their promises, Kenyatta did not address his promise to share publicly this SGR contract between Kenya and the Chinese. It is time for a new consensus. After ascending to power together, the relationship between Kenyatta and his deputy is now all but dead. Africa report, Kenyatta's administration has not achieved much of what it set out to do. However, the dynamics are different now. The economy is spiraling out of control. 23rd of December, I wrote an article in memoriam, Ring Out Wild Bells. 9th of December, I was talking about how it's time to big up the dosage of Quaaludes. Top in business IMF scorecard, half of all public projects have stalled. David and D, an IMF straitjacket as a fitting end to Jubilee's reign of hubris, blunder, plunder, squander, and abracadabra. IMF is saying that the 16% VAT that the government scrapped on sensitive goods such as bread, cooking gas, maize, and wheat flour has significantly contributed to collection shortfalls. If that is reintroduced, it's a seriously bad idea. We had credit problems with short-term bonds and some commercial paper defaulted. Nakumatt, which had 24% yields, and basically no one did any credit analysis in this country at all, and they're all getting 4 billion. It's gone up in a puff of smoke in Nakumatt. Nairobi all share up 0.48%, NSE 20 up 0.57%. Kenya is developing East Africa's first snake anti-venom, according to Al Jazeera. Sasini was the top gainer yesterday. Leasehold land was revalued by Knight Frank and was increased in valuation terms by 700 million shillings. They didn't write that into the balance sheet, however. Thank you for listening. Wishing you a terrific weekend.